So I think, I mean, one thing that comes up to me, so here's some delicious images of food,
Go
is
back to those for 1 second. Let's just
that's an arepa from
sit
Anytime
there for a minute.
Arepa. That's from Foxfire, I believe.
Right.
Um, and I think, so Chella, to your point of protecting, holding, creating spaces for culture too, because that's another conversation that has, as investment comes in, of having an analysis of which cultural spaces have existed successfully in the neighborhood over time. You're a part of one. And I think what Jesus, I think you're part of, and Ursula, you've also like helped create cultural spaces, is creating, spaces where culture can be kept and held. These are images from the pandemic. And I think, like, to me, one thing that strikes me about Zocalo, and then also, I mean, obviously, Child, the work you're doing at WPCA is ushering in a new generation of leaders. So that the cultural representation in Walker's Point and what we consider to be art and culture is also being produced by people in their 30s, their 20s, and younger. So can you guys talk a little bit about the protecting and holding space for kind of the emerging culture that's coming up at the same time?
I think it's important that these new developments that are coming to the neighborhood, that they're open to have these discussions. They shouldn't wait for the community to seek them. They should seek the community, and being open to listen. And I think once people understand that we're willing to listen, take their feedback, and include them in the development, I think they realize that what the goal is, the overall goal. I just feel like what's worked for us is really just embracing unique ideas from everyone, and I think that's what's really helped us get to where we are today.
So, I mean, I would like to maybe contribute that to me, there's always been like two kind of Walker's Points. I mean, there's the Walker's Point with the Latino community, which was very tight knit and a lot more of a residential area. And then there was always the area First Street, Second Street, and the areas east of there. And they have developed, I think they two ended up developing very differently. Early on, there was a lot of affordable housing that came into the neighborhood, and a lot of that was just built. I mean, there was very little conversation about who was going to occupy those buildings and, what they're contributing to the neighborhood. And then with that also came all the new type of restaurants that all of a sudden started to make Walker's Point safe for rest of Milwaukee. Because I remember very strongly the rebranding of Walker's Point at one time as the Fifth Ward. I don't know how many of you still remember that, but that was a very deliberate ploy by developers at the north end of Walker's Point to kind of pull that area apart from the quote unquote bad parts of Walker's Point. And I know there's still some people who keep on referring to it as the Fifth Ward. And to me, that was always very kind of detrimental because it was trying to pull part of the essence of Walker's Point away in order to make it appear or in order to send the message that it was safe to come here. And I think over the last 15 years, that has kind of gone away, and that is no longer a big concern of people going to Walker's Point.
Because we're going to be obviously wanting our young people in the classroom to experience our conversation, can you all give us some boundaries, some geographical boundaries for Walker's Point?
So the way that we as an association used to describe it was the river on the north, the lake on the east, Greenfieldish Avenue on the south, and then I-40, whatever that freeway is called, on the west.
Chella, I know you're having some thoughts. I can tell from seeing you. What do you got? What are you thinking about?
No, I mean, I think that, Ursula, you bring up a really good point, and I'm just thinking of the loadedness of when we look at, just how divisive, development has been. We need to analyze just like how development also, interrupted the sense of community. We look at, the highway that was built and the ramifications that had, with the displacement. We look at, the development of the UCC as this like anchor organization in that area, and just kind of like what that meant for the folks as, new buildings are arising, just like the sacrifice that other folks had to make, most likely unwillingly, most of the time. And just analyzing that that we do have a history of development resulting in violent ways of disrupting community. So I think that there's a lot of healing that has to come from that I think we are still waiting to do in many ways and forms. And it doesn't make it easy that, this new wave of development is really looking at, just kind of not acknowledging, I guess, like the history that has been there. I even remember, Ursula, you talk about Fifth Ward. I remember when it used to be called the Latin Quarter.
Right.
And just kind of like, who is doing these like marketing things? Like, who is approving all of these like things, right? So
That was Nick Anton.
Yeah,
Nick
that was
Anton
the
did that one.
marketing.
So those are all, the questions that I think I have, especially, as, current leaders in our city, is really, going back to our responsibility as, I wouldn't necessarily say holding space, but really amplifying the platform for other people to really share their stories of the impact of what they want to see. We talk about, community involvement from the inception of these ideas. I think that there's, like I said, there's a long way to go in terms of really involving community in ways that's not, performative. And I think that a lot of the organizations, just because, community work is hard. Community work takes a long, long time. It's built on trust. So you can't expect to have trust in communities, overnight. So it's a process that I think doesn't necessarily always align in best interest of, development plans or, building things because, there's a timeline we need to get this done. So just recently I've been thinking just a lot about, the urgency behind things and just, inviting my peers to just be very critical as to, how we're moving, why we're moving, and then who is moving things for us.
We have a related question, Marcella, that I want to pose here from one of the folks on Facebook. And I certainly want all of our panelists to offer some thoughts. The question is, what advice can you give neighborhood tourists, in quotes, to also be neighborly? How do folks experience culture and space in appropriate ways? I guess without too much appropriation. Huh?
I mean, I think that starts from, individual work. I think it's really, being, knowledgeable of the self in terms of, your intent going into spaces. I think that when we talk about the role of, extraction practices, I think it really begins with, way of perceiving. So, just acknowledging that way of how you're approaching the work. Kind of checking what that is, like if there's an opportunity for, education, to seek that out, to, just the way that that can be applied, I think is a way that starts from within. So I think that's step number one. Step number two, I think it's really, it goes back to that sense of, community, and we can probably spend a whole other time frame really analyzing what community means and who is an insider, outsider, or whatever. But I think that it's important, to have people come and experience, the spaces that, have resulted from the sweat, blood, and tears of, just folks that want to be able to make a living and, use that as an opportunity to put cultural pride at the forefront. I think that it's realizing that has been a history that, this is not something new in terms of having successful businesses. There's various examples of family-owned businesses that have been here for a long time. And then just, knowing the history, I think most importantly, of the neighborhood or, you know, area that you're going into is really important.